Hey, it's Moe Ari
and Tiffany.
And you're listening to the #Love Goals podcast. Before we get into this episode, I just want you to remember that every human, regardless of identity, needs these three things: belonging, authenticity, and love.
And after a decade of partnership, we've learned to co-create these things and so much more.
So from wherever you're listening, we're going to go on a journey of becoming our own #Love Goals. Now let's get into this episode. You are now listening to the #Love Goals podcast. It's Moe Ari
and Tiffany.
Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, I've been thinking a lot about my time as a therapist, and I get asked a lot about what helpful communication strategies I might be able to offer to people, or how to help couples really just communicate better in relationships. And I think the biggest thing that I've realized that most people may not always incorporate, depending on where we come from, our family's origin, is that communication is a very intentional process. And so we have to opt into communicating in a different way. And I think that's the missing piece. I think a lot of times we don't just opt in to communicating differently. We might just reproduce what we've seen. Yeah. We might make the assumption that our relationship should just function from a place of, it should just function from our own expectations about what communication should look like. And we don't always lean into just exploring if there are any better ways of doing a thing. Yeah. Just because something is working, quote unquote, right? Or it's not broken down does not mean that it's not worthy of an upgrade. Yeah. We don't wait for our iPhone to break and like just completely bust until we get a new one. You might do that. I don't do that. And I don't want to treat my relationship like that, is what I've realized over the years. And especially as a therapist, it's so much better to come to building solid communication when you're not in the ER of your relationship, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so the biggest piece of advice I've had for couples is to get together and intentionally decide how you want your communication to be, how you want disagreements to go, how you want to have disagreements in a way that allows for alignment, for authenticity in the relationship, for each person to be heard, to feel seen, to feel loved, and to really integrate that communication into the into your entire relationship. So not just how you handle disagreements, but how you approach the relationship on the day-to-day basis. So example, I'm gonna let you talk and then I'm gonna give an example.
No, I think you're really right in that, Mo, because I realized coming into just our relationship from my own family of origin, how many behaviors or mannerisms around communication that I had that I just thought that was standard, that was right, it was going to work for our relationship, or that was going to be the healthiest approach for us. Yeah. And I really wasn't willing to hear what you had to say, because I thought that's how you communicate. Yeah. That's how you have a conversation. That's what is going to help us get on the same page. Yeah. And so I feel like over the course of our relationship, actively, even currently, I have really had to lean into other forms of communication, other ways to be able to get my point across. And sometimes it's just as simple as talking, getting my point across. Yeah. In my family of origin, we don't really talk. And so I thought it was okay. Like, if I don't have anything to say, like, I'm just at peace, I'm calm, I don't have an issue. Yeah. Not the case. But yeah, I'm gonna let you tell your story.
No, that's good. Yeah. I think you're getting to the heart of, I think, what I was wanting to share, which is that depending on your family of origin, you could have learned to show up into communication in a particular way. that prevents you from having successful communication with your partner who didn't grow up in your family of origin, does not have the same coping strategies and survival mechanisms, and really wants to communicate with you from a place that's different, that's healed, that is, different. And so becoming aware of that is just so important.
Yeah.
I think a pivotal moment in our relationship was, I can't remember the topic of the conversation. I want to probably say it has something to do with being new parents and having a lot of responsibilities and different things. I can't remember it now. Do you mind if I tell the story?
Tell the story.
So we were having some disagreements around, and we probably talked about this in other episodes, around the responsibility that was on you you were working at the time, 9 to 5, and then Nova, because we had a baby in the pandemic, she was at home with you.
Yeah.
And that was challenging sometimes to have her be at home with you while you're working. It wasn't her, it was the work thing.
Yeah.
And I think you were often like, I just need more help. And it wasn't that I wasn't doing anything. I was doing all of the things, being very present. But it was that you were feeling that your level of responsibility was just unfair. And I don't think at the time you quite saw how many things I was carrying and where we were in our relationship. So throughout the conversation, it feels like we kind of clarified and clarified and clarified. And eventually I was just like, I think this conversation would have been better prior to us having had a child. Because what I was realizing was that we weren't on the same page about the fact that we never laid out what we expected or our vision for the relationship going into that. So we had different expectations and we never communicated. So we were operating from a little bit of a misalignment.
Yeah.
Like I was like, my role as a parent is a provider. And I'm going to show up and create space in time.
Right.
But you're a mother. And so you're going to be over there mothering. But had I known in your vision of the relationship, you wouldn't be doing that full time and working a full-time job. I always had like 10 jobs. So, and that never changed. But our relationship had changed. So how we had that intentional communication, it would have been different. And I think by the time we ended that conversation, we understood generational trauma. We understood that this is a common responsibility / burden for many Black men and women, masculine and feminine people, however you identify. This is a common thing that has been an inheritance for us, that so many of us are feeling overworked, under-resourced, and it shows up in our relationships. So we were like, how can we undo this? So by the end of that conversation, I was like, you know what? I'm going to figure out how you're not going to be working in 3 to 6 months, and you're not going to ever be able to say this to me again. I remember you being like annoyed with me. Like, what do you mean you're never? I was like, I'm going to just show you that the vision that I have for this relationship, that we can co-create this relationship. I'm going to show you that it can work so that then you can buy in. Because I didn't want to just sell you a dream. I didn't want to say, I can make it so that you cannot work, or you can figure out what your passions are so you're not feeling burdened. Not only did that pan out, Nova gets to go to daycare.
Yes.
And so you're not even with her, but now you're pursuing all the things you're passionate about. And I was like, that was the vision that I saw, because I didn't want you to have to struggle like generations of other Black women doing things that you weren't aligned with anymore, that were draining you. I could feel it every time you would talk to me, that you were feeling all of that weight. And I just wanted so bad to take that off of you. However, we had to communicate about that. Now, I would love to hear your perspective from that conversation, because that's just me talking. And I know everybody wants to hear from Tiffany. So,
no, I appreciate you saying that, because, you coined it as the vision you saw, but I will challenge it and like give yourself more credit here that you were inclusive of me in that. So that was the vision we saw. And we only were able to arrive at, this is our shared vision, because we had an intentional conversation.
I think we were going about it in different ways.
Exactly. And so you bringing your piece of the vision to the table, me bringing my piece of the vision, I was able to reconcile or like realize you know, I always saw myself being a mother, like taking care of my kid. I knew that this would be super amazing.
Yeah.
But you were able to allow me to connect to the fact that I don't know if I could also see myself doing that, working full time in a role that wasn't aligned.
Yeah.
Before that conversation, that probably, I mean, it might have crossed my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was really able to sit and be like, this is not the vision that I have for myself. And Mo, how are we going to create this together? But it took real intentionality. It took me being willing to talk, have a conversation, forego what I thought beforehand and really lean in here. So, I mean, I feel like that conversation was pivotal. It still
really
sits with me. I mean, I think about it like almost every day, like, we are really out here creating this vision that we have for our relationship, our family,
for generations.
For generations, yeah.
Yeah, so that they don't have to struggle, so that they don't have to figure it out, so that their inheritance can be not just wealth, but also this abundance of mental health and real love. It would have been nice to not start at square one, but I'm sure it would have been nice for our parents too, you know? Like they didn't, and in actuality, we didn't start at square one.
Yeah.
Just giving real honor and reverence to everyone who's come before so that we could get to the place where we could figure this out.
Yeah.
You know, because they had their own struggles and they didn't get us to the finish line, so to speak, but they got us extremely far. And I think about, you know, just generations removed from slavery, what relationships were looking like, you know, because people weren't allowed to be in the same place, you know, let alone be queer, let alone be Black. You know, I just feel so grateful that I was born in this time so that, you know, I get to really live authentically. So many of our parents and grandparents had to sacrifice. And I think that really came up in the conversation. It's like, okay, so, you know, no sweat to them. We didn't necessarily get the tools because they didn't actually have the tools. They were facing a lot of systemic things. And there's a lot of space now for us to really rewrite the story, do something different for future generations. So I definitely think we both leaned in that moment to take the opportunity. Like shifting gears a little bit, because I'm so grateful that, you know, we were just able to talk about that story. I think some of the intentional tools that we had at the time in that conversation were extremely helpful and supportive.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to say if there were any that stood out to you, that maybe there are strengths that we have in our relationship. Maybe there were things that were challenging about that conversation. But what comes to mind when you think about the tools that we used in that time?
Yeah, so I feel like while I was pregnant and through the beginning of the pandemic, you and I have been doing a lot of work around accountability.
Yeah.
Really
Ownership.
Being accountable to what was ours in the relationship. What did I come to this relationship with just by being Tiffany from Orangeburg, South Carolina? Like, what did I come here with?
Yeah.
And so I think in that conversation, there was a little resistance at first, but I was really able to just feel disarmed and not on the defensive.
Yeah.
And you might hear my voice trembling because I just feel really emotional about this conversation. But I feel like I was able to really pause and say, okay, Tiffany, what has been your role in how Mo and Tiffany have communicated over the years?
Yeah.
And particularly in this space, how have you communicated or not communicated what you needed, communicated or not communicated what your vision was? And I was able to say, you know, I take ownership of this.
Yeah.
And it kind of just, it's like leveled the playing field.
Yeah.
And so I was able to then really lean in and be vulnerable to the conversation we were having. I'm sure there were a lot of other tools, but that one in particular, still to this day, is like, ooh, yeah, like.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Ownership, if we had to list them out. So we're going to, let's enter this segment we're going to call hashtag love resources. It's something new that we're going to add to our podcast because we want you all to walk away with tangible tools for creating your own love, being your own love goals. So hashtag love resources. I think ownership is the first one on that list. If you're going to have successful communication in a relationship, it's like you have to be intentional about accountability and ownership over what is yours. A foundational premise that we're operating from these days is that we are mirrors.
Yeah.
If there's something happening for Tiffany that's activating me, I have to be clear that that is something that's coming up or coming alive inside of me, that's being shown to me outward.
Right.
What's happening for me has to do with me. If I'm having a reaction to someone, it's not because they did something to me.
Right.
It's not that they're having their whole experience over there. Why am I taking it personally? Why am I reacting? There are so many times in communication, we've done it. You know, I've been a couples therapist for a while, where it's like someone has an issue. They bring it to the table. They're sad about something. They might not even be rah-rah about it when they come. They might not be like up in arms with their partner about it, you know? But they'll say their feeling and then the partner is extremely reactive. How could you feel like that? That has to do with that particular person that is reacting. Their reaction is all about them and what's coming up for them. So in those moments, I'd ask them to sit with what is coming up for them that they can't hold what that person told them and not take it personally. And if we can't have ownership, we can't have enough separation in our relationship in order to be able to have these conversations. It becomes very like codependent, so to speak, where we're always reacting to someone else's feelings. Even if you're reacting in a positive way, like as in, okay, I'm going to come and make sure that everything's okay with you. It might seem positive, but that's also another form of codependence. We're not responsible for anybody else's feelings. I don't want other people to be mad at me. That is codependence. We're always learning that because why? Our foundational relationships with our family, our parents, we don't want them to be mad at us. But that's a form of codependence. It's challenging to say that as a child, but as an adult, we have a lot of control over that. So becoming aware of those leftover things that prevent us from having full ownership, not mean autonomy, not just accountability, but just sovereignty. Just because Tiffany is feeling a thing does not mean I have to feel a thing. I can be actually empathic and compassionate and hold a lot of space without it rocking my world. It doesn't have to. And when we can get to that level of separation, then we can have conversations and hold anything that's coming up for the other person. So ownership is number one. Do you want to add something?
I was going to say too, with that, it's like you can get to a point, let's say, if we're seeing ourselves as mirrors, I'm going to use this example. You know, I say something and I'm like, Mo, you're judging me, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm not judging you. Like nothing about me is judging anything you're saying right now. And I feel like a tool is, even if you get to the point where you're not really able to see the mirror in that present moment, being able to quickly shift. Now, this isn't always the case, but more recently, because I've been really trying to be accountable, I'm like, you know what? I'm judging myself. I'm judging myself for even saying that. So even if I wasn't aware of the mirror or wasn't as accountable initially, being able to quickly pivot. And I think that's a part of ownership, because you're not going to always realize it immediately. But when it's brought to your awareness, to say, this is probably my stuff, or whatever the case is.
But it sounds like tool number 2 then, though, is look in the mirror. Because ownership is one thing, but you can't get there unless you look in the mirror.
True.
So you're inviting everyone to take a real look. Like even if that look is at your partner, see them as yourself. We started this practice in 2020. We would say, just like me.
Just like me.
And it was helpful because we would be having a disagreement and maybe we were not seeing eye to eye, but we would challenge each other to hold this just like me.
Yeah.
And when we do that and we say, just like me, it allows us to see ourselves in everyone. So extend this beyond your partner, if you will, because it really will help you in your relationship with your partner, and that become a default of how you operate. This person is just like me. So it'll invite us into curiosity and wanting to explore what's coming up for the other person. So I love that. The second one is look in the mirror.
Yeah. And it also helps us to refrain from projecting. We can so easily be like, you don't like this thing, or in negative context. And it's like, that could be something you're actually feeling. So that mirroring is so important.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so the third tool is to intentionally shift any language around conflict. And I have air quotes going for the people that are listening to this on Apple Podcasts or your other streaming platforms. Any shifting the language from away from conflict, because conflict has this connotation of fight or against. And we're really needing to team up together so we can confront things together. We can align together. So I like alignment as a word. I like confrontation as in we confront the thing together.
Right.
But if you don't take confrontation as together, don't even use the word confrontation. We have to be clear about that. Because a lot of times we use the word fight or instead of disagreement, we say conflict instead of alignment or confrontation. Or conflict instead of misalignment, if that makes sense. And so using this terminology like conflict or fight, it really creates a fight response.
Yes.
And we need to resolve this defensiveness. And so the third skill I'm saying here is to reshape how we look at conflict.
Yes, that's been major for me because oftentimes I had gone into our disagreements or challenging moments seeing it as me versus Moe, me versus Moe. And I've had to create tools that might sound silly, but like literal affirmations when we have these moments like, you know what, we're on the same team. We're confronting this issue that's external to us together. Like we're a team going at it, not us against each other. And that's been very helpful for me to kind of shift. And even like you're saying with just language, like calling it confrontation. If argument means fight, like we against each other, don't use that word. Like find another word. So I agree. Yeah.
So there are a lot of other helpful tools we can name. I think the fourth one that is coming to mind is just checking in with your tone and not in a way that's like, watch your tone. It's really me saying, what is your authentic voice? What is it that you want your partner to receive from you? If you were your most authentic self just out in the world, how would you talk? How would you walk? How would you be with your partner? If you can visualize that, use that voice. A lot of times we're not speaking in our highest self or from our highest self. And so the voice is more distorted. So I know personally I can be very direct because I've been because I'm not trying to make an excuse. I'm just trying to articulate. I've had a lot of experiences where people didn't get it when I was trying to say it several times. And it wasn't because I was sugarcoating it. They just took my niceness for weakness. So I've gotten to a place in my life where I'm extremely direct. But I don't like that. That's not my authentic voice. So I've been in full ownership of that. Like, well, actually, I'm going to only bring in relationships where you can hear what I'm saying when I'm saying it. You respect my boundaries. Then I don't have to go from person to person, you know, charging at them with this bluntness, and not in a mean way either. It would just be very on the nose. Like it would be no sugarcoating. And honestly, it's the truth is not. If it's not compassionate, it's not the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how you are really working on that in our relationship, and I would say that almost on the opposite for me. I feel like I have kind of lean towards indecision. And I think I've done that because when I have made like these sweeping decisions or choices, so many reactions like, why are you doing that? Why you feel like that? So it's from, I mean, not in our relationship, but in family, in friendships and things like that. And so I've leaned more to like neutrality, but it's really not as helpful in relationship to just waft between two different decisions without actually making a decision. Yeah.
Right. And I think in full ownership of those particular things, like for me, I had a lot of other options than to be blunt. That narrative that I had about people not listening to me, I chose to be blunt.
Exactly.
I could have chose to not speak. I could have chose to speak more and continue to be my authentic self. So I want to show like to anybody listening that it's still a requirement to have ownership over why we do what we do so that we can change it.
Right.
Because we have to understand that we always have a choice. Mm-hmm. So choosing to show up in a particular way in your communication with your partner, that's a choice.
Yeah.
And so if you really want a healthy relationship where you're your own love goals, then you have to choose that. And you have to choose that every single time you open your mouth, every time you have communication, and really get to the heart of what's happening too. Don't just do that to tiptoe around each other, because that's not any good either. Really do it in a way that allows you all to get to the bottom of what's happening for you.
Yeah. I feel like getting to the bottom of it is the only way it's going to have a long-term impact on your relationship. Yeah. It might help that particular confrontation at the moment, but unless you get to the root of it, it's going to keep happening over and over in different forms in the relationship.
Absolutely. I think disagreements are misalignments. That's all. And we don't have to see them as the end of the relationship. We don't have to see them as like us being incompatible. I think they get blown out of proportion because we don't always have the tools. So if you're listening to this and it just feels like, man, I just haven't had the tools. Moe and Tiffany are just like I haven't had the tools. It's okay. Most of us do not. Our parents didn't have them.
No.
Our grandparents didn't have them. And maybe you're like of the rare occasion where your family did have some of those things. And that's beautiful. Share those with other people. Share that with your partner. But most of us had to go to therapy to figure that out. I had to do therapy school and then 10 years of offer other people therapy for it to sink in. So, you know, we're in this together. But I just want to close our episode right here. We're going to keep having these conversations about communication. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you.
It's been #LoveGoals with Moe Ari
and Tiffany.
Have a great day and be well.
Bye. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.
If you want your question featured in an upcoming episode of the #LoveGoals podcast, go ahead and send your question to lovegoalspodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website at lovegoalspodcast.com and follow us on Instagram at lovegoalspodcast. We look forward to hearing from you soon.